This is very exciting that we're back here at PEP, as Oliver said, and please welcome Sam. I've got to know Sam through one of our other groups that we run called the Transition Group, where people often come through when they're between roles. And I've been really impressed by, I guess, the maturity and the way that Sam has approached his current transition. And really getting to know Sam outside of those meetings, there's a real story behind that. And that explains why he is in this sort of current state, mental state, I think that he is, that I'm sure you're going to enjoy hearing his thoughts. So Sam, welcome. Thank you for speaking again, because we were here Tuesday.
Thanks so much for having me. It's a real privilege to have the opportunity to speak to you. I feel quite humbled by the opportunity to be here and I hope that some of the things that we can talk about, as I share my story, that I might learn something about your story as well.
Go back. Sam, tell us a little bit about your own upbringing, your family. Yeah. Sort of set the scene for us.
Yeah, so I had a very usual and wonderful upbringing. I grew up in Canberra, hold the tomatoes, and tennis was the first love of my life, basically. I did grow up in a home that was nominally Christian. My mum took me along to church. My dad was Catholic. I went to a Catholic school, but tennis was the one passion of my life. Happy to do all of those other things so long as it didn't get in the way of my desires to play every spare moment.
Yeah. And what happened to that career, that tennis career?
Yeah, well, I stopped growing, as is patently obvious to everybody in the room. If you're on Zoom, I'm not the tallest unit. And I discovered that my competitors and my fellow tennis players didn't stop growing, and that put me at a somewhat of disadvantage. Although I don't know if you saw earlier this week, if you follow tennis at all, there was a match between John Isner, one of the largest players on the tour, and Diego Schwartzman, who probably is the shortest player on the tour. And Schwartzman's used to be almost top 10, is top 20 player, phenomenal. And somebody like me has amazing respect for somebody like that can go it with the big guys, because I couldn't.
Yeah. So you didn't pursue tennis, rather dentistry. What led you to that?
Yeah, when you get to the end of year 12, which is a long time ago for most of us, for all of us, I think, and you're asked to make this decision, what do you want to do with your life? And really, who has any idea what they want to do with their life when you're 18 years old? I chose to do dentistry because it was an undergraduate degree at that time. And somebody told me that, graduates, highest earning graduates, dentists. First year grads. And I thought, wow, that sounds all right. I had a dream to live in a town up the coast, to have a house on the ocean, on a headland, north facing, overlooking the beach and the coast, and to work, maybe 3 days a week if I had to, surf when I wanted to. I could continue to enjoy tennis, and drive a nice car. That was sort of my goal, my dream. And I thought, wow, here's the road, dentistry. What a great way to do it. Be your own boss. Away you go. So that was really the main driver for my flawed decision-making process.
So how did that? So you came to Sydney. You went to Sydney Uni. So you mentioned that through the course, though. Perhaps your fellow students didn't think you were the most likely candidate for dentistry.
Yeah, by the end of the degree, you do a yearbook, particularly in small courses. There's only 50 graduating from each year. But when I went through dentistry, and at Sydney Uni, and in my yearbook, they wrote most likely to not be a dentist.
But you did really well.
I did graduate close to the top of my class, but the reason why I was most likely to not be a dentist, the other comment that somebody wrote somewhere else was, Sam, good luck saving the world. Is because basically what had happened to me during my university time was that God had got it in a hold of my heart, and I exchanged one lesser passion for a greater passion. And that greater passion was to have my life count to have my life count, to make a difference in the lives of people who didn't have the opportunities that I had, who didn't grow up playing tennis and wonderful things like that, who grew up in very different circumstances. And I wanted more than anything to be able to use my dental skills, or whatever skills that I had, to use my life to be able to provide care and express my faith, the love that God had for me, by caring for other people. And so that became a consuming passion for me. And even before I finished dentistry, everybody knew it. That's what they wrote about me, and I aggressively pursued that in my life to be able to do that. Yeah.
So we know you from the bio we sent out that you spent 12 years in China.
Yep.
Was it always going to be China, or what led to that decision?
Yeah, not always China. I started reading books about missionaries when I was in university and afterwards, and some of those books are written and I was captivated, and particularly books about China. But I knew that this was no fairy tale, and this was not something to pursue just because you've read a book about a place. So therefore, this is like a fairy tale. Go and it'll be like it is in the book. I knew that what I wanted. So what I did is I just cast myself open to different organisations and said, "Hey, I'm a dentist. I'd love to volunteer my time and go anywhere in the world. Where are there opportunities? Where can you send me?" Interestingly, it took 2 years before an opportunity arose. You'd think, like, if somebody was going, "I'm a dentist. I'm happy to work for free. Where do you want me to help?" That there would be lots of opportunities. But it took 2 years, which was great. I did a lot of things during that time.
You even met someone.
Yeah. So I started dating the person who is now my wife, and 6 months after we started dating, I left for China, and then we got engaged halfway through that year.
So you went to China.
Yep.
Just give us a bit of a picture for the environment, because you're not in Beijing or in Shanghai, are you?
No, we were in southwest China, in Yunnan province, which is close to Myanmar, Vietnam, Laos, that part, Tibet as well, tucked underneath Sichuan and underneath the Tibetan plateau. It's mountainous and rural, and there's lots of very diverse in terms of the different ethno-linguistic groups that populate that area. You go over one mountain range and into the next valley, and there's different people living there, or a mix of different people living there who are not Han Chinese, who don't speak Mandarin, who speak their own dialect, or not even a dialect, their own distinct language. And very, very, very different for a white man, a Lao from Canberra, didn't speak one word of Chinese when I first went to China. What was I doing? What was I thinking? I don't know. You have these courageous or foolish plans when you're young. But there I was, and I found myself immersed in a Chinese culture, in a place where not many people spoke English, where there were not many white people. And at that time, I was doing village doctor training. So we were going into even more remote areas than where I was actually living, carrying our equipment on our backs, crossing wild rivers.
Tell us a bit about that, because that's a good story.
Yeah. So I remember once giving a speech later on to some donors, as I was trying to raise funds for the organisation I worked for, and I was in Shanghai at the time, speaking to a group of businessmen, similar to this actually, and I put together a presentation. I was talking; they were mostly Americans, and I put together a presentation of how did you get to school, and so I had a photo, obviously, of the yellow American school bus. And then I said, and this is how, where I work, the kids get to school like this, and it's a zip line across a river, and not a zip line like you and I might use if we go to an adventure park with safety things, and actually that's hooked onto the line so that it cannot fall off the line. It's really just two rollers on an L bar like this that just sits on top, and they just rely on gravity and good luck to get them across. And the river, if they fall into it, is actually, in Chinese, is the translation, it's called the Angry River. And it's called the Angry River for a reason, because it's very, very turbulent.
And so you would use this for your work?
Yeah, okay, when we needed to depending on where we were going, different places, we would have to, cross the river in different, and take our equipment and team up to places that's the only way to get there.
Wow. Yeah. So you did learn the language and the culture to a degree?
To a degree, yeah. I don't think not many white people are able, or foreigners are able to really get a mastery of Chinese. I had a proficiency in Chinese, and it was a utility in Chinese, let's put it that way. But every single Chinese person will know that I'm a foreigner speaking Chinese, and I don't use the language with subtlety and nuance and precision. Like,
but you know the word for molar and eye tooth.
Yeah. You certainly pick up all the words that you need to. And
yeah. So what would be some of the big challenges you say you faced?
Yeah, I think some of the most confronting things is really, I mean, cross-cultural living. When you live in a very different place, sometimes you expect that they're going to be different. And I think one of the biggest challenges is actually it acts like a mirror to yourself, because everything that you find different actually shows you an assumption that you, up until that moment, have never been able to see about yourself. The things that are most innate to us or most close to us, part of who we are in our culture, we're unaware of them. And it's only when we're placed in a different environment that we have even the opportunity to see those things. And sometimes those things can be confronting to discover them, and to discover that your way isn't the right way, that what you value isn't necessarily the most valuable thing, or your hierarchy of values doesn't. And so I gave the example on Tuesday of efficiency. I think a lot of us in this room would probably have efficient use of time and resources and things like that, fairly high towards the top of our tree in terms of values. It's kind of irritating to us when time is wasted. It's irritating when resources don't seem to be used as efficiently as they possibly could. But that's not every country's value system. And they don't operate on the same values. And those things are really challenging when you really want to wrestle with that. If you're just there for a few weeks, sure, no problem, you can get by. But when you live somewhere for more than a decade and these, have a really good opportunity to not only encounter these things, but to see if they can be stripped out of you.
So if it's not efficiency, I would have that frustration.
Yeah.
What do they value and cherish?
Yeah, and that's a complicated thing. You could probably say anything about China, and it's true of somewhere in China, but I think relationship is very high up. Harmony, social order, and harmony. Remember the Olympics? They had the character for her when they did the Olympics, and that's means sort of like it forms part of words around peace, harmony, those kinds of things. Is very much a value. But relationship, but the way that you and I might value relationship then might be, well, I'll respect your time by trying to finish this talk on time, right? The way they value relationship is by, if I come late, as long as I bring you a nice gift and we can go over time and whatever it might be. And the relation, even that value of relationship would be expressed very differently to how you and I might express relationship, a value of relationship too.
And what were some of the real joys that you experienced?
Yeah, I think discovering just it taught me to believe in people so much. I've had the privilege of working alongside Chinese colleagues who grew up in an environment very different to mine, in poor, remote places. And these people didn't have the chance of getting an education that I had. But boy, were they capable. Boy, were they intelligent people. Boy, were they people that at first glance, it might be easy for you to dismiss them because of how they appear on the surface. I remember one lady, her name was Yeminama, because she was a Lisu lady, and that's like, what kind of a name is that? Well, her daughter's name was Yemina, and the ma on the end means mother. So her whole identity was that I'm Yemina's mother. Her own name became Yeminama, and that's what we all called her. And this was a lady that was involved in helping us run a foster care program in these very remote places. And she was like, she had the ability to bring some kind of sense of structure and order to something that was incredibly chaotic, where children who had lost their parents and needed a home to live in, orphans, were placed most of the time, hopefully with extended family, or at least within the same village. And she was coordinating a network across dozens of villages of placing these children. And yet her title is just Yeminama. She does it, and just people like this that we would so easily overlook or think nothing of, and so capable, so amazing, no education, no ability to write, not because she doesn't have the intelligence to write, but simply because she's never had the opportunity to go to school before. So I think for me, just the opportunity, some of the joys is just seeing how God takes his people and forms them. And it taught me the value of people. You know, like, oh gosh, we all have the opportunity every day of our lives to call into being the gifts and the talents that the people around us have. And each person, God says, is made in his image, fearfully and wonderfully made with amazing things. Even that most annoying person that we can think of on our team that we wish was on somebody else's team, you know, even that person, okay, we have this opportunity to see something in them and to call it into being. And I learnt about things like that in a deep way through my experiences in China.
Which became very relevant later when you came back to work here.
Absolutely.
Because you did wish some people were not on your team. But we will come back to that later. So tell us also, you worked a lot amongst HIV infected people.
Yep.
Tell us a bit about that.
Yeah, so HIV was in the early and mid 2000s was, I don't know if you can recall, but it was the world's emerging health, or current biggest health crisis still at that time. It seems like a long time ago, doesn't it, when HIV was in the headlines. And at that time, the WHO was forecasting that China would be the world's most affected place. And the part where we were in China was one of the hotspots, because I've described it to you as close to Myanmar and Laos and Vietnam. The other name for that area of the world is the Golden Triangle. And when Afghanistan was on the blink, this was the area that was producing the world's opium supply, and it was coming through that part of China on the Burma Road across to the eastern coast of China for worldwide distribution. And what happened was, in the parts of China where I lived, is that heroin became abundant, cheap, and widely used amongst people that had no idea what they were doing and had a culture of sharing needles because of relationship, because that was their culture. And so HIV spread rapidly in the community and devastated so many people. So we worked on a team I led programs doing HIV care and prevention, and worked alongside many HIV affected people from that community who were on our team, trying to provide care for families and others whose lives were basically being just torn apart by this. Yeah.
Give us a sense, though, for why that was so important in that culture. To help these people.
So stigma is a real issue even anywhere, right? We all know that even there's forms of stigma in any culture, and in that culture, if somebody, you know, when these people, I'll try and tell this story quite quickly. One of our colleagues who was HIV positive in the hospital, and we were visiting him, and there's a hospital that's just a ward, it's the HIV ward. But the people coming into that place don't necessarily know what HIV is or know that they have HIV. And so regularly what would happen if we would go and try and support people in that place, my team and I, largely the team. And we were visiting our colleague who was in the hospital, and a family came in, and this family discovered that the husband was HIV positive, but the hospital doesn't provide any further counselling or support or anything at that time. That was it. It was just like, you're HIV positive. Okay, we'll treat your symptoms of your whatever illness you have right now, and we'll get you on a program for antiretrovirals to treat your HIV, and that's it. But what we do is we come alongside those families and we would counsel them and say, well, you really need, the wife really needs to be tested for HIV too. And unfortunately, your two young children who are 1 and 3 years old also need to be tested for HIV. And so what would often happen to these families is that they would come in and within the space of about a week, their whole world would have collapsed, because very common that every member of the family be diagnosed with HIV. They'd return to their village, and in those villages then, even though legally they were supposed to still be able to go to school and things like that, stigma was such that the kids were bullied out of school, or all the other parents in the village would say, not allow the school principal to let these kids come to school anymore. People would throw rubbish at their house, not buy the goods that they were producing on their small plot of land. So all of a sudden, in the space of a week, their whole life is just completely ruined. And we would be trying to provide care and support for families like that.
So fast forward towards the end of your time, you you've got a much bigger role, a wider role, and there was a quite dramatic turning point. Tell us about that.
Yeah, so if you stick around in an organization for a long time, they ask you to do more things. Initially from doing village doctor training and then running HIV projects, got asked to lead a whole area for the organization I work for, and then part of the senior leadership team. And in that role, we had a broader vision to be able to, we could see that the days of international NGOs were numbered in China because of the policies under the current leader there. And so we were trying to rapidly spin off all of our projects to locally registered entities, and so that those projects could be run sustainably by Chinese entities. And one of the things that we would do to do that is we would travel to different places and try and equip Chinese believers and others that were willing to run these same sorts of projects and run, just help them with strategy, help them with anything that we could in order for those things to be successful. And so I made a lot of trips to a lot of parts of China. I'm doing sort of leadership development and having the opportunity to work with people. And many of those trips, you kind of think, oh, this is a bit dangerous, this is a bit sensitive. Like one time I was in a part of China, and it was probably we probably had gathered, I don't know, 200 house church leaders that represented probably about well in excess of 20,000 believers. Like, they were the leaders for that, and we were just meeting in this one place, and they have these mobile phone jamming devices so that the authorities can't track it and whatever. And it was sort of like this security thing. You think like, wow, something bad might happen here, and it didn't, and it never did. And then another time I was just in a different city doing a very small meeting with 4 leaders and myself and 2 of my colleagues, and after lunch on our second day, 20 policemen, half uniformed, half plainclothes, burst into the room, yelling and shouting and grabbing everyone, throwing us against the walls, and confiscating all our stuff, and videotaping everything like they like to do these days in the law enforcement. And that came as a complete shock. If it was going to happen on any of my trips, it wasn't going to happen on that one. But there it is. It happened on that one, and I was detained only for a day. But the challenging thing, I think, was for me was that they sit you in a padded room, 4 or 5 of them intensely questioning you all day long in Chinese, accusing you of things. I got accused of being in a pyramid scheme, all sorts of things that they try and accuse you of. And then at the end of this process, you're sitting in a chair that they can shackle you in. They didn't shackle me in it, but they could. It's fairly intimidating sort of stuff. Made me feel very, I'm not really in control here. I thought I knew China. I thought I was pretty comfortable in China. I've been here a long time, 10 years, and But then at the end, they produced this big long document in Chinese. Say, here's a transcript of all we've talked about. You have to sign it, and then you can go. And you think like, wow, I know that from our conversation, you accused me of all sorts of things. I'm not sure. Like, I can read Chinese, some Chinese, but I can't read this 10-page document and be confident that my Chinese is okay, but it's not that good, And so there I am. I have this dilemma. What do I do? Do I sign it and go? Or do I say, oh, I need the English translation before I sign it? And then I could have a 2-week holiday with them while they prepare the English translation. So I decided to sign it. You'll probably say foolishly. And I don't know what, still to this day, I don't know what was in that document that I signed, but it did cause me to have some sleepless nights for the next year and a half as we continued our time in China. And there were many nights where I would wake up convinced that somebody was at the door, that was going to happen all over again.
Because by now you've got a wife and a couple of kids. And so perhaps no surprise, a year or so later, your visa's not extended.
Yeah, in some ways, yeah. I think it's hard to know in China. You never know. That's the other thing about culture. We like to speak directly, and then what I'll do is I'll reflect back to you what you've said just to make sure that I've understood what you've said. In China, you don't get direct conversation going on very much, and you normally don't really know exactly what somebody else is thinking or why they're doing something. And in matters like this, you'll never know. So there's a lot of reasons why my visa may not have been renewed, and this might be one of them.
Okay, so you're wrenched out of China up to 12 years, come back to Australia. settling back here wasn't so easy for you, was it? The readjustment and.
Yeah, it was difficult. I mean, you think you're fine, but I think sometimes when you when you have a major change, you kind of just get very focused on the task of, okay, we had to pack up our whole life in 3 weeks. We had to move back here. We had to find schools for our kids. We had to find a place to live. You know, all these things that kind of happen rapid fire, and you go, you just get task mode, and you go through it, and then once you get through all of those tasks and there's no tasks left, then you're left with oh, what do I do with myself now? What do I try and do? So what I tried to do is, I thought, like, I was talking with my local church, and I was like, don't know what, I'm not a dentist anymore. My registration had expired because I hadn't been doing clinical practice. And I don't know what I'll do, but I've sort of been doing ministry ever since. They said, would you like to come on staff? And I said, okay. We went through that process. It took a long time, and eventually I got on staff. But then I discovered that sort of all of the tasks had run out, and I started to fall apart. And I think, yeah, I know now, as I had some post-traumatic stress going on in my life, and it was a very difficult experience for me, because I'd always been quite a confident person. I'd always felt like, you know, willing to do things, willing to do brave things that other people would say, wow, you're crazy.
Zip lines.
Yeah, go on, just do it all. And here I was, and I had no perceivable challenge in front of me left, because I'd done all the difficult tasks. We'd done all the pack up. We'd gotten out. I'd resettled my family. I'd done. Now I have this role ready to go. And I basically got to the end of myself and found that I had nothing. And I was starting to fall apart, and I didn't know why. And I went through a period of acute anxiety. I didn't sleep for 2 months, and decided very wisely that, wow, I need to get help. I don't know what I need help for, but I need some help. And I put myself in the care of professionals, and in a very and then over the course of the next few months, just started to really allow God to do a deep work in me. And I'm really thankful for that experience this day, because sometimes we all probably struggle with this to some degree, but I certainly did, that my identity was way too tied up in what I did. My identity, my sense of value, my sense of why am I loved? Even though I could tell you the gospel, I could tell you about that God loves me unconditionally, and I could tell other people about that very theologically correctly. For myself, subtly somehow, my sense of value, my sense of worth had become completely enmeshed and engaged and caught up with what I did, with the things that I did, with who I was. And yeah, this process removed from me all of that, and left me finding, wow, I've got nothing left to stand on except for God. And I found that, wow, when I had run out, he had not. When I was weak, he was not. And he was more than able to show me and to reveal to me in a much more profound way. I think we're always on that journey. I hope it never stops. I hope I never stop growing in my understanding and discernment of how deeply he loves me, and how much that's not connected to what I do for him.
Yeah, thanks for sharing that. Let's just move to the last chapter, and then I'm sure there'll be some questions. And if you're online, please just use the usual function of the raised hand, and Al will unmute you and you can ask your question through the Zoom as well. But you then do land another role. Tell us a bit about that. In fact, you thought you actually were in this room at one point too.
Yeah, not quite this room, but I met a Taiwanese businessman who runs a business, one of the founders of My Health Medical Group. So they're GPs that run GP practices. They have over 100 across the eastern seaboard of Australia now. I joined them when he met me, and he said, wow, if you could last 12 years in China, I'd back you to do anything. And he said, and I was like, wow, this is the first time anybody's been interested in considering me to do something. So I thought, wow, and he said, I want you to be my chief people officer. And I said, I'm not a HR person. I'm good with people, but I'm not a HR person. I don't know much about HR here in Australia. And he said, it doesn't matter. Compliance, for some entrepreneurs, compliance isn't that high on the list. Thanks for the laughs. Like, that was one of my great struggles, because I care about compliance myself, and that was so hard to work in a role where compliance is a big deal in HR, particularly currently, isn't it? Anybody running a business where you're employing people on awards and things, it's hard these days. And so he was happy to give me a shot. So I had to learn quickly. But then during that time, the thing that was hard for me stepping into that was related to this identity question too, because it then becomes, I'm so used to having my purpose in the things that I do. When you're caring with your own hands for people that if I don't care for them, nobody's going to care for them, it's quite easy to define your purpose and to feel like I'm doing something that's of value and this makes a difference in the world. And that's what drives me. And all of a sudden I find myself, here I am, and I'm looking at spreadsheets and I'm trying to make decisions about resourcing. And yeah, that's all good and well, but what's my purpose? And I found myself having to wrestle with that question. And I really didn't find it easy. And this is probably where you should be speaking to me, because I'm sure you all have much more experience with this than me. But I discovered a wonderful purpose in actually making my goal every day. I remember going to work every single day, and one of my shirts has a thing on it here. It says "Be nice to people" written on the bit of my shirt here. And I say, yeah, that's not just something that we should whatever. I said, it wasn't because of that, but this is my purpose. And I found this great purpose in going into work each day. So I'm not here for my day to go well. I'm not here for my boss to think, wow, I'm the bee's knees. I'm not here to see my career grow and to do well. I'm here to set other people up for a win. I'm here to be able to make somebody else's day go well. I'm here to make them think, gee, I'm glad Sam's here, because somehow everything seems to go better. And I don't need to get the credit for it. Now, that's a wrestle every day. And that was a wrestle every day. And particularly when things are not fair and not everybody thanks you for being nice all the time. And while it might sound good to say, I don't care who gets the credit. Oh, well, sometimes you do care who gets the credit. I do care. And then how do I lay that down? But I found this great sense of purpose in aligning my daily life with trying to, like I said before, call into being the gifts and the talents and the things that other people have to contribute and to set them up for wins. And for me, that was just, really transformative in that role. And I think it's something that gave me a lot of motivation to be able to get up every day, come to work with my best, and to ask God all the time, God, I can't do this on my own. There's so many things that go off in me that are not aligned to this purpose. So I need you as much as I needed you in China. I need you even more now. And that was, and that's how I approached my work life. Yeah.
Especially given it became quite problematic, and ultimately that chap who hired you let you go.
Me. Yeah, yes. That's right. Use the real words. Yeah. So I mean, yeah, it was the reason why I didn't meet in this boardroom, but the business was going through a sale. We had one of the other private equity firms, Crescent Capital, as a majority owner when I joined the business, and by the end they were going through a trade sale, and Medibank ended up buying actually at the end of the day in a transaction that ended 12 months ago, that closed 12 months ago. But I met a lot of the private equity firms during that time, and that was a different experience for me. Meeting in rooms like this rather than sitting around on little bamboo stools sipping tea made in black pots. Yeah, but that process, I think that it's hard when what do you do when people are making decisions that maybe are not in line with what the stated vision and values of a company are, when it's maybe more in line with their own personal interest and benefit? And how do you call that out? And I got tangled up in trying to respectfully, I know my place, and I'm not trying to cause trouble, but just trying to call out some of those things. And that only ends one way sometimes if you're not the boss. And so, quite suddenly found myself, well, sudden is a funny word because, it always happens suddenly, but there's always a build-up, isn't there? So I found myself at the end of last year being asked to leave. Yeah, quite today.
Well, it's been great, Sam. There's lots more that we could unpack. You're now in the transition and sort of thinking through the next stage. But gentlemen, you might have some questions. And the way we're going to do that is I'm going to ask David just to go around, because you're doing this purely for the guys on the Zoom to hear. You just have to flick that up and it's on. So if anyone's got a question, just flag and David will come around. Or if anyone on the Zoom has a question, just use the raise hand function and Al will unmute you. That's a bit rich coming from you, John.
So, Sam, what do you hope to do next if it was up to you?
Yeah, all through my working life, the thing that I really love to do, well, I talked a little bit about it, was really like the thing that was the biggest joys was seeing my Chinese colleagues live into their potential that was untapped. And that's always been the thing that excites me. I love being able to walk alongside people. We use the terms coaching or mentoring or those kind of things. I don't really mind what we call it, but just I love having the opportunity to get alongside people and help them to be and to contribute all they have to contribute, you know, to fulfill their potential. That's what excites me. Opportunities to be involved in that. Even no matter what role I've had, I kind of always just gravitate to trying to spend more and more of my time doing those things anyway. Yeah.
Other questions, gentlemen?
So I asked this question having done quite a lot of work as a management consultant with not-for-profits.
Yeah.
Where there's always a tension between the mission and the money.
Yeah.
Very hard for the mission to survive without the money.
Yeah.
And the challenge that I've seen as a consultant is trying to bring the two together.
Yeah.
You've now been in that position where you've worked on the mission and then you've worked with the money and you've seen the same tensions. What advice would you give to other not-for-profits as to how to deal with that kind of tension?
Yeah, I think the tension largely comes as well in my experience. So that, yeah, I could be wrong, but my experience is that those tensions come from the fact that people that are in not-for-profits are there because they're so passionate about people. And then the people that are funding those things need to have some kind of transparency around, is this funding accomplishing what we've agreed that it will accomplish? And how can we demonstrate those things? And the tension arises in that these people just want to get busy helping. And they don't necessarily have the skill set or the passion, and they often feel threatened by the tasks that are involved in demonstrating the being able to report accurately and clearly and transparently on the things over here, and that costs money to do that as well. So where I've stood in that is actually, I've been a passionate advocate for training and equipping the people that love to help people to get better at designing and evaluating their work, so that because I believe that there is a lot of work that goes on that out of a good heart, but it could be so much better. The resource could be better deployed. So there's a synergy between these two, and I think it's often set up as a conflict. And that happens because I think sometimes too much, both sides of that tension only want to see their own thing. Like, why do these darn funders always put so much pressure on us to do these reports? I don't care about the report. I just want to help people. And over here, it's like, why can't they understand that we need to demonstrate the outputs of our work quite clearly? There are actually really great synergies there and important steps. We closed down a leprosy project because it was actually causing harm. We only knew it was causing harm because we were rigorously evaluating it and measuring what the impact we were trying to have. If I told you what we were doing, you'd go, amazing work, sounds good. I could write a nice narrative report that would and it would sound wonderful. But if we weren't actually rigorous in measuring the actual outcomes and what are we trying to change, what are we trying to accomplish here, and actually measuring that, we wouldn't have known that we were actually causing harm. So I think there's a lot of answers to that question. I don't know if that's helpful to take it in that direction. That's my experience and that's my passion as well in that space, to marry those two. Yeah.
We've got a question from Jeff online.
Question from Mel Duncan.
Oh, from Mal? Okay, you go first.
Mel Duncan.
Oh, sorry, Jeff. I'm trying to work out the raised hands. G'day, Sam. How are you? Sam, you mentioned obviously in countries like China, you're starting to see the decline of civil society. And I wonder what you think an overtly Christian-based organisation, in terms of providing aid and support in those communities, needs to do to make itself viable in that sort of community.
Or do you need to tell me something?
Yeah, I think currently, let me speak cautiously. Any answer I give about China is maybe only true in some parts of China. It's very diverse. The part of China that I know, which is a small part of China, currently largely impossible for an organisation to be overtly Christian unless it is part of the government's registered Free Self-Patriotic movement. At the moment, I know this is being recorded, so I just things are taking a much turn for the worse. Anybody that's meeting right now in the places where I used to live, anybody, even Chinese believers who are meeting in unregistered groups of more than 4 are being arrested and imprisoned simply for meeting. And that's happening right now. That's unprecedented. That's not how it was. That's going back to like how it was in the 80s and before. So there are changes afoot. I'm not saying it's like that everywhere in China. I've got other friends in other parts of China, Shenzhen and the like, where things are remarkably different. Yeah, in different parts of China, yeah, that question is answered differently. So yeah, I think it takes a lot of humility, a lot of courage, and the prayers of God's people to enable things to be happening in these sorts of places where it's hard to work.
Well, let's go to Jeff online now.
Sam, thanks so much for sharing openly with us. I've been really enjoying what you've been saying. You mentioned after you came back and you kind of came to the end of yourself and you went through a process. Do you feel comfortable talking about that process?
Oh yeah, 100%. Yeah. What can I help? What could I talk about, Jeff, that would be helpful?
Oh, just to understand. Was that like a one-on-one, counselling, or was that like a spending time away on a retreat, or was it digging deep into the Word of God or prayer?
Yeah. So it was a lot. It was multifactorial. I think it was. In the first instance, it was just being willing to accept other people's help. It's like if you broke your leg, you wouldn't continue to walk around your leg on your leg going, this leg's going to do me just fine and I'm going to fix it myself. If your leg was broken, you wouldn't expect your leg to just fix itself or just to get on with it. The challenge, I think, with mental health challenges is because there's no perceptible injury that we see and that we feel it, but we don't see it. You kind of think, and you look around your life and you kind of go, there's no real reason why I should not be sleeping. Things are okay. Nobody's going to burst through my door now. And yeah, there's no reason why I shouldn't be sleeping. So gosh, surely I can, I'll just try another day and it'll get better. It'll just go all right. I think that's the first thing is for me was just being that process was just being willing to go, something in let's just say my mind, my mental health is not right. And I'm not going to fix myself. I have to, and I'm making it sound so straightforward, incredibly difficult step. Probably the hardest step was to be willing to accept help and to acknowledge that I needed help. Painfully obvious to my wife and to those around me. I was not myself. And so I let them help me too. I let my wife make a phone call to a GP to book an appointment because I couldn't do it for myself because it was hard for me to acknowledge that I needed help. I let her drive me to my first appointment with the psychologist and wait outside so that I would actually go and have a conversation with the psychologist. Things like that. And I asked certain people in my life to say, don't let me stop getting help until it's obvious that I don't need help anymore. Don't let me get myself off this hook just because I think, look around and think, I can't see a break in my leg. I'm just going to keep walking. I can't see any problem. Let's just carry on. Carrying on I tried and it doesn't work. So yeah, professional support through GP, seeing a psychologist. And that was quite a simple process. It's really just, they tell you some very simple things. And about reframing, for me, it was about reframing what I was thinking and identifying and replacing certain habitual ways of thinking with new ways of thinking. And then it was, yeah, there was some deep reflection with God and real deep pursuit around very simple things. So not something that, like, I'm a thinker. I love to think about theology and read books and study and learn. I'm passionate about that. This was so hard for me to do because I was given an assignment which was just, I want you to think about the concept of grace and whether or not you really know that for yourself. And I'm like, my first reaction to that is, I'm offended. I'm like, how could you think that I don't understand grace? I've been, I've been to Bible college. I've been a missionary. I've been a preacher and a teacher. All of these things. How could those are all just my internal voice saying those things. I said, yes, I'll do that assignment. But that's what was going on inside. And then I just tried to allow God to speak to me through things that I thought I already knew. Like I knew them, but I didn't know them. In a way that I needed to know them. And I found that my discovery has been wonderful, and that there's a depth to knowing those things that I'll never plumb. I will never get to the end of it. Yeah.
Thank you. I'm sure there's a lot more we could say there. We're actually just going to have one final question. Will, you wanted to ask a question?
Yeah, thanks, Sam. Very good talk. 12 years in China. What are your thoughts and observations with the rise of Christianity? It's a big question, but if you obviously, concise, it's probably the first time I'll ever be able to ask this question. Someone's been on the ground for a longer period of time. Yeah. Observations and thoughts. Thank you.
Yeah. You hear a lot of stats thrown out around the size of the church in China. If you've ever cared to read about it, about the number of believers, and there certainly are a lot, and in different places. I think the church, the church in China has grown most rapidly during periods of persecution. The church in China grew very rapidly under communism, dramatically and rapidly at great cost. People suffered a lot as they chose to follow Jesus. And I think that my brief comment would be, right now we're seeing a similar thing happen in China, although we won't have the same eyes and ears on it in some way, because what happens when there is persecution is even the left hand in China doesn't know what the right hand's doing. This group of Christians doesn't know what that group is doing for good reason. So it causes a sense of less connectedness, but a concentration of authentic faith that is an amazing witness to people around them in their community. Yeah, when people, because they love each other. That's what the scripture says, isn't it? When we love one another, that he'll draw all men unto himself. And that's what happens in the church in China. The temperature goes up. They love each other.
Let's thank Sam for his time.